Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel, Gajpal A Learning. In this video we will continue the previous topic, nervous system. Today the topics covered in this video is about central nervous system. So let's start. First let's see about introduction to central nervous system. The central nervous system, CNS, is a complex network of tissues and structures that play a vital role in coordinating and controlling the functions of the human body. It consists of two main components, the brain and the spinal cord. The brain, which is located in the skull, is the command center of the CNS and is responsible for processing and integrating sensory information, initiating and coordinating motor functions, regulating emotions and thoughts, and controlling various bodily functions. It is divided into different regions, each with specialized functions, such as the cerebral cortex, cerebellum, and brainstem. The spinal cord, a long, cylindrical bundle of nerves, extends from the base of the brain through the spinal canal within the vertebral column. It acts as a conduit for transmitting signals between the brain and the rest of the body. The spinal cord plays a crucial role in relaying sensory information from the peripheral nervous system to the brain and coordinating motor responses by transmitting motor signals from the brain to the muscles and organs. Together, the brain and spinal cord form the central nervous system, which integrates and processes information received from the peripheral nervous system. Composed of nerves that connect the CNS to the limbs, organs, and other parts of the body to regulate and maintain the body's overall functioning. The central nervous system is involved in fundamental processes such as perception, cognition, movement, and homeostasis. Next, structure and function of brain. The brain is a highly complex organ that serves as the command center of the central nervous system, CNS. It is responsible for a wide range of functions, including sensory processing, motor control, cognition, emotion regulation, memory storage, and coordination of bodily processes. The brain can be broadly divided into several interconnected regions, each with its own specialized structures and functions. First, cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is responsible for higher cognitive functions. It is divided into two cerebral hemispheres, the left and right hemispheres, which are connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. The outer layer of the cerebrum is known as the cerebral cortex, and it plays a crucial role in conscious perception, memory, language, attention, and decision-making. Second, cerebellum. Located at the back of the brain, below the cerebrum, the cerebellum is involved in the coordination of voluntary movements, balance, posture, and motor learning. It receives input from sensory systems in the cerebral cortex and integrates this information to fine-tune motor control and movement precision. Third, brainstem. The brainstem is the lower part of the brain that connects the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. It consists of several structures, including the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. The brainstem is responsible for vital functions such as regulating breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, sleep-wake cycles, and basic reflexes. Fourth, limbic system. The limbic system is a collection of brain structures involved in emotion, motivation, and memory formation. It includes the hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, and parts of the cerebral cortex. The limbic system plays a crucial role in regulating emotional responses, forming memories, and modulating motivated behaviors. Fifth, basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are a group of structures located deep within the brain, primarily involved in the coordination of movement and motor control. They work in conjunction with other brain regions to initiate and modulate voluntary movements, suppress unwanted movements, and regulate posture and muscle tone. Fifth, thalamus. The thalamus acts as a relay station for sensory information, receiving signals from various sensory systems, except olfaction, and transmitting them to the appropriate areas of the cerebral cortex for further processing. It also plays a role in regulating consciousness, attention, and sleep. Next, the spinal cord is a long, cylindrical bundle of nerve fibers that extends from the base of the brainstem down to the lower back. It is a crucial component of the central nervous system, CNS, and serves as a communication pathway between the brain and the rest of the body. The structure and function of the spinal cord can be summarized as follows. These structures work in concert to process information, control body movements, regulate physiological functions, and support higher cognitive processes. Structure of spinal cord involve. First, gray matter. The center of the spinal cord contains gray matter, which is shaped like a butterfly or the letter H. The gray matter consists of neuronal cell bodies, and myelinated axons, and glial cells. It is divided into dorsal, posterior, horns, ventral, anterior, horns, and lateral horns, with each region having different functional roles. Second, white matter. Surrounding the gray matter, the spinal cord consists of white matter, which contains myelinated nerve fibers, axons, bundled together into tracts or pathways. These tracts serve as conduits for transmitting signals between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. The white matter is organized into ascending tracts that carry sensory information to the brain and descending tracts that transmit motor commands from the brain to the muscles and organs. Third, spinal nerves. Along the length of the spinal cord, pairs of spinal nerves emerge at regular intervals and extend outward. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves in total, each with a sensory, dorsal, root and a motor, ventral, root. These spinal nerves connect the spinal cord to specific regions of the body and play a vital role in transmitting sensory information from the body to the CNS and relaying motor commands from the CNS to the muscles and organs. Now the function of spinal cord involves. First, sensory processing. The spinal cord is involved in receiving and transmitting sensory information from the peripheral nervous system to the brain. Sensory neurons in the peripheral nerves detect various stimuli, such as touch, pain, temperature, and proprioception, awareness of body position, and transmit these signals to the spinal cord. The sensory information is then relayed to the brain for further processing and interpretation. Second, motor control. The spinal cord plays a crucial role in motor control. Motor commands generated in the brain are transmitted through descending motor pathways in the spinal cord, which activate the appropriate motor neurons. These motor neurons then send signals to the muscles, initiating and coordinating voluntary movements. The spinal cord also plays a role in reflexive movements, where sensory information is rapidly processed within the spinal cord itself, resulting in quick, involuntary responses. Third, reflexes. The spinal cord is involved in mediating reflexes, which are rapid, involuntary responses to specific stimuli. Reflex arcs, which involve sensory neurons, interneurons within the spinal cord, and motor neurons, allow for the quick and automatic generation of reflexive movements without requiring input from the brain. Examples of reflexes include the withdrawal reflex, pulling a hand away from a painful stimulus, or the knee-jerk reflex. Overall, the spinal cord acts as a vital conduit for sensory and motor signals, playing a critical role in facilitating communication between the brain and the rest of the body and coordinating various bodily functions. Next is afferent nerve tract. Afferent nerve tracts are neural pathways that carry sensory information from the peripheral nervous system, PNS, to the central nervous system, CNS. These tracts transmit signals from sensory receptors located throughout the body to the spinal cord and brain for processing and interpretation. Its functions are: first, sensory input. Afferent, or sensory, nerve tracts carry sensory information from the peripheral nervous system, PNS, to the central nervous system, CNS. Sensory receptors located in various parts of the body detect stimuli such as touch, temperature, pain, pressure, and proprioception. These sensory signals are then transmitted through afferent nerve fibers to the spinal cord and brain for processing and interpretation. Second, perception. Afferent pathways enable the perception of sensory information. Once sensory signals reach the CNS, they are relayed and integrated in specific regions of the brain, such as the sensory cortex. This allows us to become aware of and interpret the sensory information, leading to perception and conscious experiences. Third, reflexes. Afferent pathways are involved in mediating reflex actions. In certain situations, sensory information can be rapidly processed within the spinal cord, bypassing the brain. This quick processing allows for reflexive responses to occur, such as pulling away from a hot surface or blinking in response to a sudden bright light. Next, efferent nerve tract. Efferent nerve tracts are neural pathways that carry motor signals from the central nervous system, CNS, to the peripheral nervous system, PNS. These tracts transmit signals from the brain and spinal cord to muscles, glands, and other affected tissues. Efferent nerve fibers are responsible for controlling voluntary and involuntary movements as well as regulating various bodily functions. Functions of efferent nerve tract are: first, motor output. Efferent, or motor, nerve tracts transmit signals from the CNS to the peripheral tissues, such as muscles and glands. These signals initiate and control voluntary and involuntary movements as well as regulate various bodily functions. Second, voluntary movement. Efferent pathways are responsible for voluntary motor control. Signals originating in the motor cortex of the brain travel through efferent tracts, primarily the corticospinal tracts, to reach motor neurons in the spinal cord. From there, the signals are transmitted to the muscles, allowing for voluntary movement and fine motor control. Third, involuntary functions. Efferent pathways also control involuntary functions, such as regulating organ activities and maintaining homeostasis. For example, efferent signals from the CNS control the contraction of smooth muscles in the walls of organs, such as the intestines, and regulate autonomic functions like heart rate, blood pressure, and digestion. In short, afferent nerve tracts transmit sensory information from the PNS to the CNS, enabling perception and reflex actions. Efferent nerve tracts carry motor signals from the CNS to the peripheral tissues, allowing for voluntary and involuntary movements and regulating various bodily functions. Together, these pathways facilitate communication and coordination between the nervous system and the rest of the body. Now the next in CNS is meninges. Meninges are a set of protective membranes that surround and support the central nervous system, CNS, which includes the brain and spinal cord. They consist of 3 layers of connective tissue that provide physical protection and help maintain the stability and integrity of the CNS. The 3 layers of the meninges, from outermost to innermost, are the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. First, dura mater. The dura mater is the outermost and toughest layer of the meninges. It is a thick, fibrous membrane that lines the inside of the skull and forms a durable protective barrier around the brain and spinal cord. The dura mater has 2 layers, the periosteel layer, which adheres to the inner surface of the skull, and the meningeal layer, which covers and supports the brain and spinal cord. Between these layers, there are spaces called dural sinuses, which collect venous blood returning from the brain and facilitate its drainage. Second, arachnoid mater. The arachnoid mater is a delicate, thin membrane located beneath the dura mater. It has a web-like appearance due to its fibrous structure. The space between the arachnoid mater and the innermost layer, the pia mater, is known as the subarachnoid space. Within the subarachnoid space, cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, circulates, providing cushioning and nourishment to the CNS. The arachnoid mater also contains numerous blood vessels that supply oxygen and nutrients to the brain. Third, pia mater. The pia mater is the innermost layer of the meninges and is in direct contact with the surface of the brain and spinal cord. It is a thin, delicate membrane that adheres closely to the contours of the CNS structures, following their folds and grooves. The pia mater contains an extensive network of blood vessels that supply nutrients and oxygen to the underlying nervous tissue. Collectively, the meninges act as a protective barrier, shielding the delicate neural tissue of the CNS from physical trauma, infections, and chemical imbalances. They also help to contain and distribute cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, around the CNS, assisting in maintaining a stable environment for optimal neuronal functioning. Additionally, the meninges provide mechanical support and contribute to the overall structural integrity of the brain and spinal cord. Next is ventricles of brain. The ventricles are a system of interconnected, fluid-filled cavities located within the brain. They play a crucial role in the production, circulation, and distribution of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. Below are the explanation of each ventricle. First, lateral ventricles. The lateral ventricles are the largest and most prominent ventricles. They are located within each cerebral hemisphere of the brain. Each hemisphere contains one lateral ventricle, and they are named as the left and right ventricles accordingly. The lateral ventricles consist of several components. A. Body, the central portion of each lateral ventricle. B. Anterior horn, the front extension of each lateral ventricle into the frontal lobe. C. Posterior horn, the posterior extension of each lateral ventricle into the occipital lobe. D. Inferior horn, the inferior extension of each lateral ventricle into the temporal lobe. The lateral ventricles communicate with each other through a small passage called the interventricular foramen, also known as the foramen of Monro. This passage allows the flow of CSF between the two lateral ventricles. Next is third ventricle. The third ventricle is a narrow, midline cavity located within the diencephalon, a region between the right and left thalamic structures of the brain. It is connected to the lateral ventricles via the interventricular foramen. The third ventricle also contributes to the production and circulation of CSF. Next, fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is a diamond-shaped cavity positioned between the brainstem and the cerebellum, in the hindbrain region. It is connected to the third ventricle by a narrow canal known as the cerebral aqueduct, or aqueduct of Sylvius. The fourth ventricle has three openings. A. Lateral apertures. These are two openings, also known as the foramina of Leschka. They are located on each side of the fourth ventricle, allowing CSF to flow into the subarachnoid space. B. Median aperture. This is a midline opening, also called the foramen of Magendie, which allows CSF to flow into the subarachnoid space. C. Median recess. This is not technically an opening but rather a small recess located in the roof of the fourth ventricle. These openings in the recess enable CSF to exit the fourth ventricle and enter the subarachnoid space, where it bathes the brain and spinal cord. Next is cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, is a clear, colorless fluid that fills the ventricles of the brain and the subarachnoid space surrounding the CNS. It is produced primarily by specialized cells called appendymal cells that line the ventricles, especially within structures known as choroid plexuses. Some of the key aspects of CSF are: first, production. CSF is continuously produced and replenished to maintain its volume and function. Appendymal cells actively secrete CSF into the ventricles, primarily within the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus consists of a network of blood vessels and specialized appendymal cells that filter plasma from the blood, modifying it to create CSF. The CSF then fills the ventricles and circulates throughout the CNS. Second, circulation. CSF flows in a regulated pattern, known as the CSF circulation or CSF flow. It moves from the lateral ventricles to the third ventricle through the interventricular foramen. From there, it passes through the cerebral aqueduct, reaching the fourth ventricle. The CSF then exits the ventricular system through the lateral and median apertures of the fourth ventricle. It enters the subarachnoid space, which envelops the brain and spinal cord. Functions. CSF serves several important functions within the CNS. First, cushioning and protection. CSF acts as a cushion, protecting the delicate brain and spinal cord from mechanical shocks and trauma. It helps absorb and distribute the forces that could otherwise damage neural tissue. Second, buoyancy. CSF reduces the effective weight of the brain, allowing it to float within the skull. This buoyancy decreases the pressure exerted on the brain, reducing the risk of injury. Third, chemical stability. CSF helps maintain a stable chemical environment within the CNS. It carries nutrients, oxygen, and hormones to the brain, while also removing waste products and metabolic byproducts. Fourth, exchange and transport. CSF aids in the exchange of substances between the blood and the brain tissue. It facilitates the transport of certain substances, such as neurotransmitters and signaling molecules, to and from the brain. Fifth, reabsorption. After circulating through the subarachnoid space, CSF is eventually reabsorbed into the bloodstream to maintain the balance of fluid volume. Specialized structures called arachnoid granulations or villi are responsible for this reabsorption. They are located within the dural sinuses, which are large venous channels situated between the layers of the dura mater. The arachnoid granulations allow CSF to be absorbed back into the bloodstream, completing the CSF circulation cycle. In short, the ventricles of the brain are fluid-filled cavities that produce and circulate cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. CSF serves vital functions in protecting and nourishing the brain and spinal cord. It acts as a cushion, buoyancy medium, and chemical stabilizer. CSF circulation ensures the continuous flow of nutrients and the removal of waste products. The reabsorption of CSF into the bloodstream helps maintain the fluid balance within the CNS. Thanks for watching this video.